On the 3rd of November, Florida hands you a ballot that could take half of your property tax bill away for good. So why is almost nobody reading the second half of it? That is not a rumor, and it is not some bill that got filed and forgotten. It is Amendment 3, it is on the ballot, and the good news in it is real. I want to say that plainly before anything else, because I am about to spend 15 minutes on the part nobody reads, and none of that means it is worthless. It is not worthless. My name is Roy Baker. I sell real estate in Florida, and I have read this amendment rather than the headline about it. So here is the deal I want to make with you for the next quarter of an hour. I am going to tell you exactly what it does, exactly what it does not do, and what the arithmetic actually looks like on a real bill. And in return, I want one thing from you in the comments. Tell me what county you are in, and what you paid in property tax this year. Just those two things. I ask because of something I noticed reading through 1,000 comments on this subject. Everybody is furious, and almost nobody knows what anybody else is paying. I have seen homeowners in Citrus County paying a little over $1,200, and homeowners out in Lakewood Ranch paying over $12,000 in the same state in the same year. The people who decide these things are relying on the fact that you do not know what your neighbor pays, let alone somebody 4 counties away. So put it in the comments and let us all find out together. Now, what does Amendment 3 actually do? Today, if the home you live in is your homestead, you get an exemption of $25,000 off the taxable value, and then a second $25,000 that applies to everything except schools. Amendment 3 takes that non-school exemption and makes it enormous. $150,000 in 2027, and $250,000 in 2028, and after that it rises with inflation instead of standing still. So what does that do to a real bill? For an ordinary Florida homestead, it is a very large change. If your house is assessed somewhere near the state median, a $250,000 exemption against the county, the city, the water management district, and the fire district takes a serious bite out of what you owe. On a lot of homes, it removes most of that side of the bill. But that is only half the page. Take the win first. It is real, it is big, and if you own a homestead in this state, you should understand it properly, rather than through a headline. Now the line that is not in the headline. Read it carefully, and you find that Amendment 3 creates 2 separate homestead exemptions, rather than one. There is the big new one, which grows to $250,000, and it applies to non-school property taxes. And there is the old one, $25,000, and that is the one that applies to school property taxes. $25,000, unchanged, not indexed the way the other one is. That is the school line, and here is why it matters more than almost anybody is saying. In 2024, Florida public schools received almost $22 billion in property taxes, which was around 40% of all the property tax collected in this state. That figure is not mine, and it is not a guess. It came out of a fact check published in March of this year, working from the Department of Revenue's own county profiles. So work it through. If schools are roughly 40% of the pot, and the amendment leaves the school side almost untouched, then even in the best case, the version where it passes and everything works exactly as written, you are still getting a property tax bill every single year for the rest of the time you own that house. A smaller one, possibly a much smaller one. But the bill does not stop coming, and the mechanism behind it does not go anywhere either. Fall far enough behind on the school portion, and the county can still put a certificate against your property. That does not change. I have seen the comment under every video on this subject that says you will never truly own your home. I understand exactly where that comes from. What I would say is that having the rent is worth doing even if you cannot abolish it, and you should go in knowing which one is on the table. Now let me correct something, because this is where I part company with the loudest voices on this subject. The most upvoted complaint I have read about Florida property taxes says the total went from $30 billion to $60 billion in 5 years, and that this happened because local government is living large. The shape of that is right. The numbers are not, and the explanation is mostly wrong. The actual figures from the Department of Revenue are just under $34 billion collected in 2019 and just over $55 billion in 2024. That is a rise of about 62% in 5 years, which is enormous and which absolutely deserves anger. But the fact check that assembled those numbers also looked at why, and the largest single driver is not spending. It is that the value of the houses went up. Florida's median home price went from around $330,000 in 2020 to about $425,000 now. And it is worth stepping outside this state for a second, because Florida homeowners tend to argue about this as though Florida invented it. We are not the worst. Not close. New Jersey homeowners pay the highest effective property tax rate in the country and have done for years. Illinois is not far behind. At the other end, Hawaii and Alabama charge a fraction of what we do. Florida sits somewhere in the middle of the table, which will annoy you if your bill just went up by a third. But it is true. But here is the thing that makes our version bite harder than the raw rate suggests. Florida has no state income tax, and Texas does not either, and in both places that money has to come from somewhere. It comes from property, and it comes from sales. So when people move here from New York or from Illinois and tell you they came for the taxes, what they actually did was trade one kind of tax for another. That trade is a good one for a lot of people, particularly for retirees drawing a pension, which is a big part of why this state fills up with them. The catch is that an income tax falls on what you earn, and a property tax falls on what you own. If you are working, that difference is in your favor. If you have stopped working and you own a house that has tripled in value around you, that difference is the entire problem. Your income did not triple. The thing they tax did. That is the sentence I would put on the wall of every retirement seminar in this state, and it is why property tax is the hottest button this audience has. Now back to the arithmetic. Your bill grew because your house grew. That is not a comforting answer, and it is not an excuse for any county commission anywhere. But if you go to a meeting and argue the wrong cause, you get beaten by somebody holding the right numbers, and I would rather you walked in holding them. And there is a second correction, and this one genuinely surprised me. A great deal of the school portion of your bill is not actually your school board's decision. A large share of school property tax revenue comes from a rate that the Florida legislature sets and that districts are required to levy in order to receive their state funding at all. Your school board does control some of it, and some increases need your vote at the ballot. But the biggest slice of the piece everybody is angriest about is set in Tallahassee and collected locally. Think about what that means for where you aim. People spend years shouting at a school board over a number that a legislature required. Meanwhile, the legislature gets to hand you an amendment that cuts the part it does not control and leaves the part it does. I am not telling you that is a conspiracy. I am telling you it is the structure, and you should know the structure before you decide who to call. While we are correcting things, the lottery. Somebody says it in every comment section on this subject. They sold us the lottery to pay for schools and then took the money. Here is the honest version. The Florida Lottery has transferred more than $49 billion to the State Education Trust Fund since it started in 1988. So the money is real, and it did go. But the lottery's own figure is that its contribution amounts to roughly 6% of the state's total education budget. 6%. Think about that against the size of the claim. It was never going to fund the schools, and it never has. Whether you were sold it that way in 1986 is a fair argument to have. But if you are hoping the lottery money explains why your bill is what it is, it does not. And it is not big enough to. Let me put you somewhere for a second, because there is a case in the comment sections that shows the whole system better than any table. Two identical houses, same block, unincorporated Palm Beach County. One owner has been there since the early 2000s and is homesteaded, and last year the bill was about $3,700. The other house was identical, and up until a few years ago, the two bills were within a few dollars of each other. Then the owner died, the son inherited it, the property was reassessed at what it was actually worth, and that bill is now over $8,000. Same street, same house, more than double, and the only difference is when the clock started. So here is my question for you, and I would like a real answer. Is that fair? Because there are two honest ways to see it. One says the long-term owner is protected from being taxed out of the home they have lived in for 20 years, which is the entire point of the cap, and it is a good point. The other says the young family who just bought in is now subsidizing their neighbor for the same services on the same street. I have heard both argued well by people who own homes in this state. Tell me which one you are, and if you have watched a bill move like that, tell us the number. Before I go on, let me say where the full version of this work lives. I keep a county-by-county assessment current, called the Florida Buy and Avoid List. 25 places I would buy in right now, 18 I would avoid, and 7 I am watching because they are moving. Every entry carries the typical value, the millage picture, the insurance reality, and the honest trade-off, with the source written beside each number so you can check me on it. You will find it linked underneath this video. Now the parts of Amendment 3 that nobody is talking about at all, and one of them may matter to you more than the exemption does. The first is that it lowers the cap on how fast the assessed value of non-homestead property can rise, from 10% a year down to 5%. That is not your house if you live in it. That is rental property, commercial property, and second homes. If you own anything you do not live in, that is a significant change in your favor, and it has had almost no coverage. But the second one is the one I would read twice. New residents would get a smaller exemption at first, for a period, before they get the full one. Read that twice if you are planning to move here, or if you are planning to move within the state and re-establish a homestead somewhere else, because the timing of when you buy could be worth real money. The third is that it restricts what counties and cities are allowed to spend property tax revenue on. That sounds like a straightforward win if you think local government wastes money, and maybe it is, but it also means less local discretion, and legislative staff estimate the whole package reduces local government revenue by around $4.5 billion in its first full year and over $8 billion the year after. That money does not vanish from the world. Your county still runs a jail, a fire service, and a road department. So ask your own commission the direct question before November. If this passes, what do you cut, and what fee goes up? Anyone who tells you nothing changes is not being straight with you. And while everybody is watching November, there are 2 exemptions sitting on the books right now that a lot of you are entitled to and have never claimed. If you are 65 or older, Florida allows counties and cities to grant an additional homestead exemption of up to $50,000, and there is a second one for long-term residents who have held the same homestead for 25 years, where the just value sits under $250,000. Both of them are income tested, and for this year the household limit is a little under $39,000. 2 warnings on those. They are local option, which means your county or your city has to have adopted them, and plenty have not. And, you will have noticed the pattern by now, neither of them touches school millage either. Same carve-out, same line, sitting there since long before this amendment was written. Go and look anyway. It takes 1 phone call to your property appraiser, and I have watched people find money they had been eligible for over several years without ever knowing it was there. Now the odds, honestly. A constitutional amendment in Florida needs 60% to pass, not a simple majority. 60. That is a genuinely high bar, and it has killed popular measures before. But there is a decent precedent here. In 2024, Florida voters passed an amendment that indexed the homestead exemption to inflation, and it took 66%. That is the same broad idea, aimed at the same homeowners, and it cleared the bar with room. So if you are asking me whether the 60% threshold is fatal for something like this, my honest read is no, not on its own. What kills amendments in this state is complexity. A clean question passes. A question with 3 subclauses about carve-outs and local funding confuses people, and a confused voter votes no. So read the actual ballot summary when it arrives, not the mailer about it. Let me leave you with the number that ties this together. In Miami last year, the combined millage across every taxing authority was almost 20 mils, which works out to roughly $2,000 for every $100,000 of taxable value. The state constitution caps most individual authorities at 10 mils each, but you are not paying one authority. You are paying the county, and the city, and the school district, and the water management district, and whatever special districts you happen to sit inside. Amendment 3 goes after several of those and deliberately does not go after the biggest one. That is the whole story, and now you can go and do the arithmetic on your own bill instead of taking anybody's word for it, including mine. So tell me what I got wrong. Somebody watching this sits on a county commission or works in a property appraiser's office and knows where my summary is too clean. That is the comment I read first, and it is worth more than anything I said today. And the rest of you, county and bill, please. I genuinely want to see the range. If you are new here, I am Roy Baker, and I go through Florida like this every week with the numbers named and the sources named. Next week I am doing the insurance side of the same bill, because there is a second number on your escrow statement that has been moving faster than your taxes have, and almost nobody separates the two. One last thing. Whatever you think of any of this, put a note in your calendar for the 3rd of November, because an amendment that would take half your bill away needs 60%, and roughly 4 in 10 Florida voters do not turn out in a midterm. The people who want this to fail are counting on that far more than they are counting on you disagreeing with it. If this was useful, subscribe, and I will see you next week.